Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Brian's Horror Corner, and welcome to this horror franchise movie review video as part of my current series where I'm taking a look at all the Insidious movies in the franchise in preparation of The Red Door, which is coming out in about 3 weeks now, beginning of July. So I've watched and reviewed the first two movies in the series. Those are up on my channel if you want to check them out. Today we're going to go ahead and take a look at the third, Chapter 3, Insidious Chapter 3 from 2015. Um, just like Part 2, I have on this, other than the first one, I have the last three on this four-pack here. So we are up to this one, Insidious Chapter 3. I don't know how well you can see that with the lighting, but yeah, I do plan on getting these on Blu-ray. I know the second one for sure I'm going to get on Blu-ray. And I'm sure I will. The third and the fourth one too. This is fine to watch the movies initially, but there's really nothing to them. There's no special features or anything. It's basically just play movie, and I don't even know if it has scene selections on them. And of course, two movies to one disc, which I'm not a big fan of. So I like these movies so far well enough to get these on Blu-rays to invest the money. I have the first one on Blu-ray, but I'm sure I'll get the other three and probably the fifth one at some point down the road, unless it really sucks, which I don't think it will. I'll get them all on Blu-ray. So anyway, with that being said, let's get into part three or chapter three. So Insidious Chapter 3 is a 2015 supernatural horror film written and directed by Leigh Whannell in his directorial debut. The film is a prequel to the first two films in the third installment in the Insidious franchise. In 2007, so 3 years before the Lambert haunting, teenager Quinn Brenner meets with retired demonologist Elise Rayner. Elise reluctantly agrees to try and contact the spirit of Quinn's mother, Lily, who died 1 year prior. However, Elise urges Quinn not to try and contact her mother again after sensing a malevolent force. Grace, an elderly woman who lives at Quinn's apartment building and suffers from dementia, says several strange and cryptic things to Quinn, seeming to allude to an unseen spirit. Quinn later attends an audition for a performance arts school. After leaving the audition, she sees a mysterious figure waving to her from a distance on the street. Distracted, she is hit by a car, breaking both of her legs. Now stuck at home with her father Sean and brother Alex, Quinn begins to experience increasingly disturbing paranormal phenomena, including seeing visions of a dark spirit wearing an oxygen mask known as the man who can't breathe. Quinn realizes that he is the same figure that caused her accident. Sean runs into Grace's husband Harry and learns that Grace has passed away. So yeah, that's to set up the premise and for Insidious Chapter 3 here. As far as the cast goes, of course we have Lynn Shay as Elise Rayner, Stephanie Scott as Quinn Brenner, Dermot Dermot Maroney as Sean Brenner, Angus Sampson as Tucker, and Leigh Whannell as Speck. So Lynn Shay, Angus Sampson, and Leigh Whannell, of course, coming back for the third straight movie in this franchise. So yeah, that's to set up the premise and the cast for Insidious Chapter 3 from 2015. Um, so this movie is obviously a little bit different than the first two movies, which focused specifically on the Lambert family with Patrick Wilson and um, Rose Byrne. Um, so this, as it says, this movie takes place 3 years before that. So we get a little bit more of the backstory on Elise Rainier, and the two her and Specs and Tucker as well. But then we also focus on a different family, which has had some tragedies to it. So overall, I enjoyed Chapter 3. Well, let's just get into my review. I don't want to say too much. It's a different kind of movie, and in some ways it's good, and in some ways it's not as good. So let's just go ahead and get into it, starting with the things that I liked or the pros of the movie. And you got to start with Lynn Shay. I mean, she really takes center stage in this movie. The first two movies, she was more of a supporting character, and she was very good at it. But in this movie, I thought her performance was the best of the franchise so far. She really does a great job of carrying this movie as a main character. Um, and having us as an audience get behind her character and be invested, not just because we have a connection to her with the other two movies. But just her performance, her portrayal of Elise Rainier in this movie as the main character is really great. And yeah, I thought she was phenomenal in this movie, the best of the series so far. And not that she was bad in the other two movies, but she's the first thing that really stood out in a positive aspect for me in this movie. I do like they changed up the setting in this movie to be in an apartment building instead of like the houses that we got with the Lambert family in the other movies. I think the apartment building plays pretty well in the ways in which it's used and explored by the characters in this movie and for the overall story of this movie. It offers some different aspects and some different sort of some different logistics as far as the story and the characters and other characters that were introduced to, sort of side characters, like this gal that has dementia, this older gal. So I like the setting. I think the movie's pretty well directed by Leigh Whannell, especially the fact that it's his directorial debut. I wouldn't have guessed that this was his directorial debut. I mean, for being his directorial debut, I thought he did a really good job. It's not as well directed, obviously, as um, the first two movies, which of course were directed by why can't I think of his name now? Oh God, I'm having a brain fart. James Wan. Ugh, don't know what happened there, but I don't think it's quite as directed from in the Insidious franchise from that standpoint as James Wan did with the first two movies. But for having it be his first movie and really executing the material that he wrote, I thought it was well directed. I really did. I thought he did a good job in creating suspense and tension that you come to expect in an Insidious movie. And I thought overall he executed this story about as well as you could, quite frankly. So, yeah, kudos to him on the directing. I liked and appreciated how this movie, as a prequel, connects to the other two films, even though chronologically those films happen after it. We get some tidbits that happen before that tie into those other two movies. I don't want to give too many of them away, but there's definitely you're definitely in the Insidious universe. I mean, it doesn't just completely ignore the things that we saw or learned in those other two movies. Again, even though this is one that takes place before those two, so I really liked that and appreciated how it does connect to those other movies and references what we know from the other ones. I thought it was cool to have that consistent continuity, and the movie does a good job with that. I enjoyed and thought the effects were good in this movie, including the makeup effects, like on the main demon and ghost, that we don't really see till the end when his mask is taken off. But I thought it was well done, as well as some of the other characters, both being ones that are being possessed and ones that we run into within the further. Um, and then I have to say too, I like the ending credits and how they were played up against the background of objects and locations within the movie. I thought that was really unique, and I'm assuming that was a Leigh Whannell decision. I really enjoyed that. I thought that was done really well. And then finally, like the other Insidious movies, I thought the score is really solid once again. Definitely has that Insidious music that we come to expect, and that really helps to define the series and helps to put this movie firmly in the place of the series. So yeah, those are my pros, or the things that I really enjoyed about Insidious Chapter 3 from 2015. Um, Getting on to some cons that I have with the movies, or some things that didn't work for me as well. The biggest one right off the bat is the fact that it doesn't have the same creepy, scary vibes going on that the first two movies had. It just doesn't get under your skin in quite the same way, and therefore it's not as effectively scary or creepy as the first two Insidious movies. Now, some of that I would have to say is probably a result of James Wan directing. He just has a way, he just has a knack for being able to scare people without having to rely deeply on jump scares, or at least not a lot of jump scares. Um, and even though I don't think Leigh Whannell does a terrible job in this regard, it just I wasn't scared by this movie. I was interested. I ended up being engaged in it eventually, and we'll get into that. But as far as the comparing it to the first two movies, which I can't help but compare it to, it's the third movie in a franchise. I was never really scared. There were a couple of scenes or a couple of moments of surprise, of creepiness, but again, it was done more of in a jump scare way. Although again, I will give them credit. It's not the false jump scares yet. They still do a good job of making the jump scares real, and not having a damn cat come out from behind a couch or something like that. But it's just overall, it just didn't have the same under your skin kind of creepiness that the first two movies had. So that was the biggest thing that stood out to me from a negative standpoint. I also liked the first movie. I thought the humor felt kind of out of place and was really forced, even more in this movie than the first movie. It doesn't really jive with the overall tone of this movie or movies, and it actually becomes a little bit of a distraction in this movie. And it's not just, of course, Tucker and Specs; those two characters are sort of the comic relief in this series. But even Lynn Shay has a line that tries to force some comedy when she's basically trying to take on one of the demons that she encounters in the further. That's kind of after her. Bring it on, bitch, something to that effect. And I don't know. I just don't. I don't know that it's necessary. I mean, yeah, I don't know. The humor just doesn't work in this series for me. I didn't mind it as much in the second movie if you watched my review. I did bring it up as a con in my first movie, but in this one, I think it's the biggest con of the first three movies so far. It just felt really out of place. There are some lulls as well midway through the movie that slows it down a bit. So I thought the movie starts well, although it is kind of a slow burn. You gotta give it time. I would say the first 20 to 30 minutes, not a lot of like really creepy or scary stuff happens, but stick with it. But I still thought it flowed pretty well, and then we kind of hit a lull in the middle, and then it picks up again towards the third act, and successfully so for the most part. But there are some lulls. It's not quite as fast paced or action packed throughout like I thought the first two movies were. Um, let's see. I didn't feel quite as connected with these new characters, the family mostly. I mean, of course, I am with Len Shay's character and Angus Sampson and Leigh Whannell's character because we've seen them before, and this is the third movie that they're in. But these new characters, especially Dermot Mulroney's character of Sean, and Stephanie Scott, who played Quinn, I thought they both did a decent job acting wise. But as far as their character is concerned, it took me a while to really get engaged with them or really get behind them or care about them. I did by the end. I was glad to see things turn out okay. So I guess that's a spoiler alert. I shouldn't have said that, but um, yeah, I don't know. I just wasn't quite as connected to him like I was with Patrick Wilson and Rose Byrne and the kids. Maybe having kids, young kids in the movie has something to do with making you feel more connected to the overall story and what's going on with the horror. But yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I got there, but I'm just not as connected to this new family as I was. Just not as invested, basically. Also, I would have liked more of a background or origin story to the main demon or ghost that we get in this movie. We really don't know anything about him, other than he's a man that wears an oxygen mask and obviously has trouble breathing. So, but yeah, there's not really a connection to like any of the family members or any of the main characters in the movie. He's just kind of there. I will say the look of him is pretty good. I think he does have a creepy look. But yeah, that was one thing I wanted a little bit more. Another thing, it's going to sound like I'm shitting on this movie, but I'll bring it full circle once I'm done with my cons here. But this movie doesn't have those mystery aspects that I enjoyed from the first two movies, especially the second movie. They really ratcheted up the mystery aspect in that movie that I enjoyed. This is much more of a standard pretty surface level kind of movie. That's not a bad thing necessarily, but it doesn't involve as much thinking, if that makes sense, as the first two movies really kind of had to pay more attention. Where in this movie, it's a little bit more straightforward, a little bit more nuts and bolts. You kind of know what's going on. So I did kind of miss that mystery aspect. As I said, it's more of a straight up ghost demonic movie that relies a bit more on jump scares. And again, the jump scares aren't bad; they're not false, but there are a few more of them. I felt like in this movie. Although I will say one of them got me pretty good earlier on in the movie. I'm not going to give it away. If you've seen the movie, you can probably guess it kind of came out of nowhere, and I certainly wasn't expecting it. And then my final con or negative, it's not really a big thing. This is kind of a nitpick, but why is this Insidious Chapter 3 when it's a prequel? That's kind of deceiving for people that aren't familiar with where this movie falls in the chronology. Wouldn't it make more sense if you were going to stick with the chapter title of having it be Chapter Zero or Chapter Half or something like that? Because you've already had Chapter Two, so when you say Chapter Three, that's going to make people think that don't know going into watching it, or I'm sure it was the case at the theater. They're going to make people think that the way the Part Two ended or Chapter Two ended, that this was going to take off from that, and it doesn't. It takes place before. So I think it would have been well served to call it Chapter Zero, or just scrap the chapter altogether and just call it Insidious. I don't know, pick another title or something. So that was just something that kind of stood out to me, and I had a feeling it probably confused some people initially when they saw this in the theaters, or even if they watch it now. It's like, oh, chapter three, they're gonna take off from where chapter two ended, and unfortunately, I have to tell you, it doesn't do that. If you like the end of chapter two and was intrigued by where it goes, when Elise's character has a shudder at the end and sees something that we don't see. But yeah, it doesn't do anything with that. So that was just something I wanted to bring up. It's not really a huge negative, but yeah, that's all I've got, guys. Again, it sounds like I'm crapping on this film more than the first, so I'm really not. I still enjoyed it. I'm still going to get it on Blu-ray. It definitely has a firm place in the Insidious franchise. I thought Leigh Whannell, the performances were good. I thought Leigh Whannell's directing and writing was good as normal. It's just not quite as scary or doesn't quite have the mystery aspect. It's just a little bit more. It's a little bit more standard for me than when I thought the first two movies were. That being said, the effects, the music, the directing, and the performances are all good to make this a worthy Insidious movie. So I'm going to give this movie a 7.5 out of 10 for Insidious Chapter 3. Good movie. I would definitely check it out. 7.5 out of 10 for me, though. So go ahead and comment down below if you guys like this movie more than I do, less than I do. Why not, if you've seen it. Please like this video and hit the little notification bell down below so you don't miss any of my upcoming reviews for this series. And please subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of my great horror content coming out, not only this series, but beyond. But yeah, I'm really enjoying the Insidious franchise, taking a look at it and reviewing them. I hope you guys are too. We got one more movie to go to before I have a final ranking and summary video. And then of course I'll be taking a look at the new movie in early July and having a spoiler-free review for that one. But yeah, I hope everybody's enjoying it. Hope everybody's doing well. But you know what? Stay scared. Bye.